CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
You are listening to a podcast by a guy that shouldn't have a podcast. It's Tim Graham and Friends.
This is Charles Barkley, and you're listening to Tim Graham and Friends. Tim, this is your last favor. Anything else is going to cost you.
It's Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. I, once again, am coming to you from an undisclosed location. Jonah is coming to us from a very disclosed location. As you can see over his right shoulder, the Channel 4 logo, that is not the Fantastic Four logo, coming to us from the old Wingin' It set.
Oh, I was going to say, if anybody really knows Channel 4 ball, if they could guess where this was. It's a little bit of a...
yeah, I'm sorry. I blew that. We could have good Wingin' It trivia. Go back through all the people who used to be on Wingin' It, where they are these days. Some have moved on to bigger and better things in different markets. Anyways, we could have had a good trivia. Maybe we can put together some Wingin' It trivia for future episode. Are you comfortable there?
Yeah, it's a nice chair, nice high table to put the laptop on. Yeah, I think it's working good.
All right, good deal. So we have some time. Nobody's going to be using that studio, I don't think. It's rarely used. Cooking segments and such. There is a kitchen in that place.
It can be used any which way for various reasons, but it's not often used. It's seldom used. But hey, somebody could blast in here at any point in time looking to shoot an interview.
Kevyn Adams might come in there. He's got nothing else to do. Maybe he'll do some sort of... I don't think we're going to be hearing from Kevyn Adams for a while, much like other former general managers as they leave.
He's actually staying in my apartment. That's why I have to do it here.
I forgot about that. Yeah, you have a buddy staying there.
We're booked. Him and Darius Slay. There's really no room for me there.
Dree Archer is using the veranda. It just dawns on me. We don't hear from former GMs much in Buffalo sports once they move on. Now, Buddy Nix has been still a friend of the media. If you call up Buddy Nix, he's glad to talk. I've interviewed him for various feature stories over the years since he's left as general manager, but we didn't hear from Tim Murray after he was gone. We haven't, Jason Bottrell's been around, but he hasn't really talked about his time with the Sabres since he has been rehired as in the National Hockey League. Darcy Regier fell off the face of the earth and has done the occasional interview. I know that there was a look back on the Golisano ownership tenure in which Darcy Regier spoke to the Buffalo News, but he generally does not talk to anybody. His whereabouts practically unknown. Are there others that come to mind, Jonah, of like...
Well, I think Doug Whaley falls in that camp where we've heard from him, but he hasn't really discussed a whole lot about the Bills and his exit. He's been
on Tyler Dunn's podcast a handful of times with his former consigliere, Jim Monis. Russ Brandon, we will hear from on occasion, and he will do something with his, UFL, USFL. I can't keep all those leagues straight as to what they're going by these days, but
it would be nice. Generally, I think in professional sports, you don't hear a lot from coaches and general managers after they lose a job, and for transparency and the interest in the leagues, it would be nice to kind of have exit interviews, or at least it feels like that happened more in a previous generation where a coach would lose his job and maybe give an interview to a favorable ear, but at least you would hear a little bit of their perspective on how things ended, and you just don't hear that anymore very often.
Or even have a news conference at the actual team that just let him go. I mean, that used to happen. When a guy got let go, he would walk out and say a few words, and even with the backdrop or whatever at the building with the local media. That used to happen quite a bit. Chan Gailey gave a kind of a farewell when he was let go as the Bills head coach, a very tearful, emotional goodbye in which he read a statement. Yeah, but usually now everybody just fades away. And the other thing too, it's hockey more than the other sports. I mean, not even want to say the other sports don't do it at all. So I don't want to say that it's just hockey does it more often. I think it's a hockey thing, is that a lot of times guys who still have time on their contract, the teams hold on to them in some capacity, as opposed to baseball, football, basketball. You're let go. You're free to go work wherever you want. And there were times, even with the Sabres, Dan Bilesma, I believe, you have to get permission to get the guy out of his contract. And so guys sit there quietly. Tim Murray was getting paid for several years after being let go by the Sabres. And with that, you're kind of bound to not talk because the team still has control of you in some way. I'm Matthew Fairburn's story in The Athletic today made it a point to mention that although Kevyn Adams was under contract for another season after this one, which was a surprise to a lot of people that came out in Matthew's reporting, but Matthew made it a mention in his story today with his interview with Pete Coelho that Kevyn Adams is not employed by the organization anymore. And I should check in with Matthew to see if that was an intentional wording, if Kevyn Adams is now a fully free agent, or if he is under that organizational control. Maybe that's just a quibble we need to figure. I don't think that he's a hot commodity to be working for any other NHL team. He's not going to be even looked upon by a rival within the division of, hey, can you give us your Sabres secrets? Because who cares? The Sabres have been so bad for so long. I don't really know what Kevyn Adams, I guess maybe he could spill some information on what Alex Tuck is looking for as a contract, or give some insights on some of those types of guys on the roster. But anyways.
He could lend his expertise to the junior Sabres again.
Well, right. Hey, he got Les Kuntar's son an NHL game. That seemed like it was a promise made on the way out the door. Like, as you recall, a lot of people probably know this story around Western New York. I don't know that it's ever been reported, but when Rex Ryan and a bunch of other teams were trying to get Glenn Gronkowski as an undrafted free agent out of Kansas, the youngest of all the Gronkowskis, and there was a little bit of a bidding war, and Rex made the promise to the Gronkowski family that if you sign with the Bills, he will play on opening day for me. And that cinched the deal. Glenn Gronkowski signed with the Bills. Lo and behold, what happened? Glenn Gronkowski played an opening day for the Bills, and then I think didn't play again. But that was Rex fulfilling his promise. I don't know if Les Kuntar's son getting that game over some other people who probably deserved it within the Sabres organization right before Kevyn Adams was let go was a promise fulfilled, but it did seem kind of strangely timed, did it not?
Yeah, I thought you were going to tell stories about Buffalo media members getting their jobs and beat assignments with managing editors outgoing on the last day.
Oh, no. Oh, I should clarify though. Glenn Gronkowski did not start that game, but he did play in that opener on 2016. He played 8 offensive snaps, and he didn't even play on special teams. He wasn't even good enough to be on special teams, but Rex got him in there as fullback on 8 snaps somehow in a, I don't know. Rex won some games. Let me see. Let me just bring that up. I'm sorry. No, it was a 13-7 loss to the Ravens on opening day. That game was at Baltimore. Anyways, Glenn Gronkowski never played in the NFL again. So, but his promise was fulfilled. You've been around Saberland, and I have been out and about and traveling here and there and doing all kinds of things. I was unable to get to the news conference on Tuesday. and not to the game last night, a victory over the Philadelphia Flyers, in which the Sabres have won now 4 in a row. What's been your take, Jonah, in the Sabres through this transition from Kevyn Adams to Jarmo Kekalainen, Lindy Ruff in limbo, and really so a lot of people within the organization in limbo as we wait and see what's to happen, but it is a new day.
Yeah, a new day. That's what Pete Gwelly told Matthew Fairburn in the interview and the story that published this morning. And in some ways, it certainly does feel like that, especially from this outside looking in perspective as the media or the fans. I think the fans really feel like it was a changing of the guard and a new direction for the franchise. But in a lot of ways, within the locker room, within the hockey club, not much has changed, or it doesn't feel like a lot of change, or the answers that they give are about how they're still taking the same approach and the same motivations and the same will to win. And I don't think that there was a big shakeup within the locker room, within the coaching staff. Something could be coming, but a lot of last night's win felt like continuation of momentum they had been building in the past few weeks, and that 3 games that they won on the road to close out that road trip. But also they now won 10 of the last 16 games. So their run of playing pretty well and being more consistent started about a month ago, and it's only continuing now.
Yeah, the Sabres have a game against the New York Islanders at KeyBank Center, 5 o'clock start for those who have tickets for that game or are thinking of going. Keep in mind that is a 5 o'clock start. Don't get there at 7. You will not have much hockey to watch if you get there in the second intermission. But the Islanders 19-12-3, so a tough opponent. The Sabres are now above 500, using finger quotes, 500, 15-14-4. It's in. What would you say was Lindy Ruff's demeanor? I watched his news conference on Wednesday. There was no practice on Tuesday. He was there Wednesday. He seemed muted, I would say. He didn't seem his usual alpha self. He was speaking in empathetic, sympathetic terms regarding Kevyn Adams and how he did not, Lindy saying that he did not perform well enough for Kevyn to keep his job. He seemed sober, very sobering comments. How was he after the game last night? And did he seem a little bit more like Alpha Lindy, or are there tea leaves to be read, Jonah?
Well, I'll go back to that first news conference. Vulnerable is the word I would use. It was the word that I used in talking with Matthew Fairburn afterward. And it was a different emotional tender from Lindy Ruff than we get in most of his media availabilities, and especially a year ago when he was very much more, I'll use the word arrogant, although I'm not trying to criticize him as arrogant, but a lot more assuredness that, he was going to come in and fix things, or the problems they were having would be corrected. That's been different all season long, but it was definitely absent from Lindy Ruff on Wednesday when he spoke to the media after the first practice. I think he's aware that it's a new general manager. It's not the general manager that hired him, that changes have been made in the front office, and more changes could be coming if the Sabres don't continue to win, or if they fall back into some of their previous losing patterns. He was definitely more relaxed and a bit more of his old self, telling some jokes last night after the win. It was also a milestone win for Lindy Ruff, 9-15, putting him in 4th place on the NHL's all-time list. And I think getting over that hump of coming home off the road trip, winning in front of the home fans, not falling into that first home game after a long road trip trap, even though they kind of did in the first period, responding to a poor first period and winning the game, closing it out in the third period. I think he was uncertain if this team could continue to do some of the things it did and winning those 3 games on the road, and seeing that they did, and they won another game and moving a little bit further along in the standings and a little bit further along towards playing consistently good hockey seemed to be a bit of relief, and maybe gives him some more security in his job, but we don't know. I mean, Jarmo Kekalainen was pretty clear that the coaching staff is going to be evaluated, and did not. He gave a vote of confidence to Lindy Ruff as a coach, but didn't give a strong vote of confidence to Lindy Ruff finishing out the season in his current coaching position, if things don't go well in the future.
a lot of speculation regarding John Tortorella because he did coach for Jarmo Kekalainen with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And he was asked by Emily Kaplan as part of the ESPN Plus broadcast last night if he's been contacted by the Sabres. Tortorella playfully, jousting with Emily Kaplan, saying that he has not been contacted. Oh yeah, there are so many instances though of coaches, especially when you talk about college football, right? And maybe not necessarily as much in the NHL, but there's all kinds of reasons to not necessarily take that at face value. And I'm not saying I have any inside information, but John Tortorella saying that he has not been contacted does not mean that John Tortorella has not been contacted. His agent perhaps has been contacted, or maybe he flat out has been having discussions and just isn't ready to say. But I do find it interesting, and in some of my reporting that has taken place since we last did this podcast, and I want to share some of it. And again, a lot of this is just speculation from smart people who are speculating, who do have some knowledge on things. And this is why the podcast can be entertaining and why so many people downloaded and watched last week's podcast. And thank you, by the way, for those who are listening. And I think there's probably a bit of a new audience. We do heavily talk about the Bills, but I think we talk, especially with Jonah's coverage of the Sabres. We do a lot of Sabres as much as we can. You don't come here necessarily for breaking news, but you can come here to learn some things that aren't in our reporting that we publish at WIVV.com or at theathletic.com. We talk about things that we're hearing, some speculation, reading the tea leaves. And I think that what we were hearing heading into last week's reporting about Kevyn Adams, we put right here on this podcast a day early. And we probably, I don't know if the Athletic were to study last week's podcast and be upset with me. We could have a journalism discussion about that. But I talked about what I was hearing and kind of led with my chin. And if you're a competitor of the Athletics or of mine or of Matthew Fairburns or of Jonah Bronstein's, you could have listened to this podcast a week ago and got on your horse and started making some phone calls and beat us on the story. So I don't know. What happened was I talked about some things on the podcast was it Wednesday or Thursday, Jonah? We did an early podcast
Thursday.
last
I think it was Thursday, but could have been a Wednesday. It probably wasn't a Wednesday with Bill's Media Day, but I think it was last Thursday we did it.
Yeah.
Early in the morning,
right. I think it was Thursday.
Yeah.
And so Thursday night it was up. And then we didn't have our story at the Athletic until Friday at about 5:00 at night. And so anyway, I guess, I probably shouldn't have said all those things because I would have given the drop to a bunch of different people to go ahead and start calling your sources, and nobody seemed to do that or didn't have the sources that I have or that Matthew has, and thankfully. But again, now I'm rambling, but I'm saying is that you can come here and get an awful lot of information at this podcast. So please subscribe. Hang on, let me clear my throat. I'm getting verklempt. Excuse me. So please subscribe, like, comment, do all the things. Had a lot of comments last week regarding what the Sabres should do, what people wanted them to do. So yeah, for 24 hours plus, you could have gotten kind of a bit of the, at least the skeleton of what was happening with Kevyn Adams before and all the different speculation that didn't make it into the story that's still out there.
Right. But there's a way that we or anybody can talk on a podcast about some speculative conjecture.
Because we specify it's speculation and it's reading the tea leaves, and it's, we can give the degrees of what we know.
Yeah. And you're not able to just write that in print the same way that you can talk about it on a podcast.
Right. So if you're tuning into this podcast after last week's, I'm about to give you some things that in my reporting wouldn't meet the criteria of 100% secure fact, but what smart people who are my sources are reading into the situation. And one thing came up that did not dawn on me, did not click with me until I was speaking with, again, I was texting in this case with a very smart source who is connected. And we were talking about how during the road trip, Jonah, Lindy had seemed to take a shot at Kevyn Adams over demoting Noah Ostlund, and a lot was made of that, rightfully so. Previous to even the road trip, Lindy talking about the three goalies not only being hard on the goalies to keep fresh, but being hard on him as the coach to navigate. Again, that was a criticism of the approach of the roster and how he doesn't, obviously would prefer that not to be the case. But here was one that was brought up to me and it didn't ring a bell. And I think it was because it came after a win, but it was after the Edmonton game in which Lindy Ruff, really uncharacteristically for him, went off against the NHL officiating. Like really over, like a lot of people thought it was a little over the top, especially after a comeback win, or however the Sabres won the game. But there were some calls in there that Lindy really took umbrage with. And he went in not only on the calls, but on the NHL itself and systemic type stuff. Very unlike Lindy Ruff to do that. And what my source said to me was that to me sounded like a coach who knows he's not going to be coaching much longer anymore. Meaning he had something to get out of his system while he still had the platform to do it. That was Lindy, according to my source, saying, I have 0 fucks left to give, essentially. And that could be his frustration over Kevyn still being employed. There could be all kinds of things like that. But I had missed that. And as soon as my source said that, I'm like, you know what? You're right. That was very un-Lindy-like. He had lost decorum. He had lost, he had lost it, to use a Lindy phrase, he lost his bolt. And anyway, so that's, I think, why it lends itself to people who are educated on this is that Lindy is not necessarily on safe ground and he probably knows it, or at least he's feeling that he hasn't gotten that assurance behind the scenes. And just something, again, one of the things that you hear, and something to think about.
I think that could very well be the case. There's another dynamic going on there in that the Sabres had some challenges and goal reviews go against them in the previous 3 road losses.
In which really Lindy took an awful lot of heat.
Right. But I think Lindy, after losing those games, didn't feel thought maybe it was a loser response to go after the officials and make excuses there. But after winning the game, kind of felt like it had a better platform to complain about, the officiating going against them in previous games. And what he was saying is these Edmonton goals should have been reviewed or reversed in the same way those goals went against us previously, or I think the frustrations were spilling out. And they won the game in overtime, but gave up 3 goals in the third period and kind of collapsed in that third period.
That's why I said comeback. It felt like a comeback when the way it ended.
And they scored so quickly into the overtime that Lindy Ruff probably felt, he knew they won the game, but that probably felt like a loss the way that third period went and how quickly it turned into a win. And he still was angry and upset with how, in his mind, officiating contributed to that game going into overtime. And that would have been the 4th loss of the road trip if they didn't win that game. And the previous 3 losses all had, officiating complaints, I think, coming out of the Sabres locker room. So it boiled over, I think, into that press conference at Edmonton. But it was odd to hear how angry he was with the officials and led off in his opening statement. He wasn't asked about the calls. It didn't lead into it later on. That was what he started with. And you usually don't hear a head coach start there after a win.
Yeah, but a great point. Maybe partially defending himself on previous issues as opposed to just what had transpired in Edmonton regarding his heavily criticized challenge in which that led to 3 goals in less than a minute in a previous game.
And let me drill on that a little bit because, if we do believe that even before Kevyn Adams got let go, when maybe your reporting started and the rumors started coming out that Lindy Ruff had an idea that he might be next. At that point in time, Jarmo Kekalainen is over in Finland attending to his father being ill. So he wouldn't have had that specific conversation with Lindy Ruff at that time. Maybe that conversation had occurred earlier, but I don't think Jarmo Kekalainen would overstep his role as the senior advisor at that point. So maybe Lindy's reading the tea leaves, but I don't know if he's been told. I don't really think Terry Pegula, while they're on the road, would have told him that. But I guess Lindy's been in the league long enough. He's been fired a number of times, and he knows, he can feel when he's on thin ice, and that could be coming.
And I'm not ready to say that because Jarmo Kekalainen was dealing with his ill father that he wasn't getting work done, because he got his contract done. his contract was worked out while now I had known that Jarmo Kekalainen was in Finland to be with his ill father. I didn't know that his father was so ill that he was near death. I didn't realize it was that serious. I knew that he was there for his father. Um, uh, but he got his contract done. He was able to do that. And again, I am always hesitant to put, especially when you're talking about medical things, or I recall when my father was near death. I mean, he was going to die. He had some sort of episode. He was hooked up to machines and he was dead. And it was kind of like we were just, I recall having all kinds of time in which I did a little work just to get your mind off of it. It's everybody's situation's different, but I don't know Yarmo's father and how sick if it's been for a long time. There's all kinds of, just the idea that somebody is going through something like that isn't necessarily as traumatic for some as it is for others. And you might get work done while something like this is happening. Sometimes you want to get away from your family members, just like go off into a quiet part of the hospital and, scroll your phone for 10 or 15 minutes, or go to the cafeteria and get something to eat with, there's all kinds of, crack some jokes, a little dark humor, whatever, the things get your mind off of it. So who's to say?
Yeah.
Um,
And one more point I'd like to make on that, and this is speculation, informed speculation. It's not anything I've heard or would report as a sourced report, but I'm of the belief that Terry Pegula does not want to fire Lindy Ruff again in the middle of the season if he doesn't have to. And I do believe Jarmo Kekalainen has the authority to make a coaching change if it's absolutely necessary, but I think his ownership's wishes that as long as the Sabres are winning and in playoff contention and mathematically possible that they can have a successful season, that you play it out to the end of the season, and there's a much cleaner break after the season with Lindy Ruff's contract being up, and perhaps he could retire or a mutual step away if they want to make a change then. And a coaching change in season is usually made to turn around this season. And I don't know if maybe there is, but I don't know if changing the coach, if firing Lindy Ruff tomorrow and hiring John Tortorella is going to get the Sabres into the playoffs. That seems more of a new direction for the long term.
It is known within the organization, or I should say, those who know Terry Pegula know that one of his great regrets was firing Lindy Ruff the first time. And so to have to do it again, I'm sure would be difficult. To bring him back, I think, was probably Terry Pegula swallowing some pride, and probably, the healing of some sort that would have to happen to bring back somebody that you had to fire. I'm sure he would rather not reopen that scar tissue. This isn't George Steinbrenner. Terry Pegula is not a despot who, fires Billy Martin for sport just to bring him back for sport. The whole thing. I mean, this isn't a George Steinbrenner, Billy Martin situation. So I do think that Lindy Ruff, if any way possible, the Sabres are going to want him to go out with as much grace as possible, if he has to go out at all. Like to your point, Jonah. The team is responding to Lindy Ruff. They have won 4 in a row. And I think that there's also a element of, let's see how this team, let's untangle Kevyn Adams and Lindy Ruff and see what these players, whatever this malaise is that we have going down here at KeyBank Center within this organization. I'm sure they've been talking to players, leadership council, whether it's Rasmus Dahlin or anybody, whoever it is. If they're smart, they have some sort of ability to channel what the players are thinking and what they're going through. And if the players are feeling a certain kind of way about the Sabres front office or hockey operations, maybe their feelings on Lindy Ruff are impacted by their feelings on Kevyn Adams and vice versa. So let's get Kevyn Adams out of the equation, and let's see how the team responds to Lindy Ruff as their head coach under a different way of thinking that, okay, Lindy does have power here. He does have agency, and it's not just, well, what does it matter if we listen to Lindy because Kevyn Adams isn't going to do anything anyway. Let's give a new, fresh perspective. Let's use the eraser on the chalkboard and start over and say, okay, Lindy Ruff is still your head coach, and let's respond to Lindy Ruff as your organizational voice without the echoes of Kevyn Adams or the Damocles sword of Kevyn Adams hanging over this dressing room. Just a thought. But that wouldn't be a dumb way to go, I don't think, if you're Jarmo Kekalainen. Let's see how these players respond to Lindy Ruff, sans Kevyn Adams.
And they've won 4 in a row in 10 of 16 games. Why would you change the coach at that point? If they go on another losing streak, we'll all be on that watch. But as long as they continue to win at this clip, a coaching change would probably be reckless at this point in the season.
Here's another aspect, before we move on to Bills at Browns, but there's a belief that the game, people who detractors of Lindy Ruff believe that the game has passed him by, that he's a bit of a dinosaur. Well, if that's the case, then how much of a dinosaur is John Tortorella? I mean, anybody who would like to see, and I've seen this, somebody's had a dream scenario, and I've seen it before, but somebody tweeted at me, and I apologize, I don't remember the name. I put your name in the comments if it was you. Lindy Ruff as hockey operations, some sort of executive, Jarmo as GM, John Tortorella as head coach. Sounds like a winning formula. Okay, I don't necessarily disagree with that. But if Lindy can't get it done, why is John Tortorella going to get it done? And you have a problem, as Kevyn Adams infamously said, with no palm trees and state taxes. What free agents are going to want to come to Buffalo, a losing organization, even if they start to win this year? 14 straight years without the playoffs. Let's say they even get into the playoffs this year. If you're a free agent, you just see the morgue that this place has been, that KeyBank Center has been for a decade and a half, and you have to go play for John Tortorella. That is not a destination necessarily. That is not a place where guys are like, yeah, sign me up for John Tortorella and the Buffalo Sabres. So Lindy Ruff, obviously a different vibe than John Tortorella, if you want to start talking about attracting free agents. But the other free agent who is out there as a coach is Peter DeBoer. And can you afford him? You may have to overpay for somebody like him because he is an established winner. He's younger. He has connected with today's hockey player more recently. And if the Sabres are willing to spend, then maybe DeBoer's the way to go. But anyway, I just wanted to make a quick point about Tortorella. I mean, you're talking about dinosaurs or guys who just don't get today's hockey player or can't communicate with them. He is, that's a legitimate concern for somebody like that.
Yeah, and Jarmo Kekalainen hired John Tortorella and worked with him in Columbus, but he also fired him. So,
Right. Cleveland Browns, the Shedeur Sanders experiment. We're going to get to watch it. Cleveland is not on national television or the game of the week here in Buffalo too often. So if you're a Bills fan, you get to finally check out Shedeur Sanders. They've won 3 games. I don't know how they've done it, but Dillon Gabriel is quarterback. Joe Flacco is quarterback. Now they're at Shedeur Sanders, the 5th round pick, probably the most overhyped 5th round pick in NFL history. And it'll be interesting because they're bad. The Browns are bad. And if the Bills think that they're just going to walk into Cleveland and win a game, though, they've proven this season against Atlanta, against Miami, against, well, not New England. I mean, New England has turned out to be competitive. I'm looking at the Bills schedule here, but we saw that game against Miami on November 9th, and then 3 games earlier against the Falcons during that stretch when the Bills lost 4 out of 7, 3 out of 5. Anyways, any concerns with the Browns or how the Bills may affect look at this tweener game, because they're coming off a big win in Foxborough in which they prevent the Patriots from putting on the hat and T-shirt after the game as AFC East Division champions, and they have the Philadelphia Eagles next week, a bigger test, although it is a non-conference game. Where do you think the Bills are as they head into Cleveland here?
Well, it's the last road game of the season against the losing team. It's coming into the Christmas holiday week, so there is trap game potential for any team and any group of NFL players and professional athletes. but I'm not too concerned about the Bills. I think the Bills uh, had their letdowns earlier this season and are a bit more focused on not having that again. They've been very good in December under Sean McDermott, especially the last few years. They know how to, play their best football in the last month of the season and peak at the right time, and they're trying to do that again. And I think the issues the Browns are facing with, their coach being on the hot seat and rookie quarterbacks, the Bills have had a lot of success against rookie quarterbacks under Sean McDermott. I know Shedeur Sanders has played well in particular games this year, but he did not play
Not
well in his
last
most
week.
recent game. And the book on him, the tape on him, and how the Bills can win that matchup might be out there. So I think the Bills are going to win this game. I don't think they're going to have a lot of trouble winning this game. As far as the letdown potential, I think if it's a close game and the Bills, are trailing in the second half or something like that, might be some cause for concern. If the Bills don't win this game easily, it might be similar to some of their wins earlier in the year where the Bills won and even won by good numbers, but you didn't like the way that they won. So there maybe is some potential for a letdown. Bills still win the game, but you have a little less good feeling about them than you do coming off that second half in New England.
The Browns have an interesting defense in that Myles Garrett is on the verge of setting the sacks record, and they will get after the passer. Josh Allen will be running around for his life on some plays. But that Browns defense that was so good last year, I'm talking about comprehensively great defense, just isn't there. They have a serious problem in giving up points. They've given up 31 points each of their last two games. In fact, going back to right around Halloween, they have given up, in order from week 8 on, 32 points, 27 points to the Jets, 23 points, 10 points to the Raiders. Of course, that's the Raiders, maybe the worst team in the NFL. 26 points, 31 points, 31 points. Two games ago, they gave up 31 to the Tennessee Titans, another bad team. So the Browns do have some elite players on defense, but not elite defense. 184 yards rushing they gave up to Tennessee, 184 to Baltimore. That's no great sin, but that's still a lot of yards. 127 to the Jets, 177 to the Patriots. Shedeur Sanders. He had that really impressive game 2 weeks ago against Tennessee, again, a lousy team, in which he passed for 364 yards and 3 touchdowns, only 1 interception. And he also ran for a touchdown. So it was a great game for him. Everybody who is a Shedeur Sanders fan was saying in your face to the critics. But then last week against Chicago, 18 of 35, 177 yards, no touchdown passes, 3 interceptions, and 2 rushes for 24 yards. He was sacked 5 times. And that's the Shedeur Sanders that we saw at Colorado, who runs around, holds the ball too long, and could be a big day for the Bills pass rush. Joey Bosa might have a sack or 2. AJ Epinesa, Greg Rousseau, they are drooling over this matchup. Bills 10.5-point favorites as of now. When you're looking at the AFC East, though, I mean, to go to when you pull back the camera, when you zero out on the situation in the AFC East, there's a pretty straightforward way for the Bills to still win the division, and it was to if they win out, which is possible, Cleveland and then the Jets in the finale with Philadelphia in between. For the Bills to win out and the Patriots to lose just 1 game, but that game had to be to Miami. Okay, that's a possibility, actually, right? Well, then Miami this week decides they're going to bench Tua Tagovailoa and some other players, and they're going to put some inexperienced guys in there. So it seems like the Patriots are going to probably have a easy time against the Dolphins down the stretch.
And that's week 18. The game's in New England. It's a run for the bus game for the Dolphins. I think if that game was this weekend, you might have a little more confidence in the Dolphins than I think I would in the last game of the season. I mean, the Patriots could lose to the Jets, and that would help the Bills too, but I don't think that's going to happen either.
Yeah. What are your thoughts here on the last two home games, Joan? Is it too early to talk about those? They look like they'll be the last two games at the Ralph. And, with the Bills unable to host a preseason or a postseason game, excuse me, until, or unless, certain things shake out in which they are the highest seeded wild card. But it looks right now that these will be the last two games. Any thoughts? Getting nostalgic at all?
I mean, I've been getting slightly nostalgic all season, especially doing these daily look backs at every game that's been played at the stadium. And I do think it'll be a very nostalgic event, the final game against the Jets there. It's a weird thing because really what we're saying goodbye to is the concrete and the seats and the goalposts and the turf because they're just moving across the street and a lot of the things about the Bills fan experience is going to be unchanged. They're not moving. They're not moving to another part of town. But it is going to be a nostalgic event for remembering all the things that happened in the past in that stadium. They're going to be wearing the red helmets. That's going to bring out some of those feelings. I think it'll be unfortunate if the Bills have nothing to play for in that game and they rest the starters. It'd be really nice if they have to win that game and they can play hard and play the Josh Allen and the important players. But this game against the Eagles is quite intriguing. Two of the better teams in the league, two of the Super Bowl favorites coming into the league. But, the Eagles have had into the season, but the Eagles have had their struggles. The Bills had some struggles weeks ago that maybe they're moved past. But that'll be an interesting game.
That below the radar rivalry of Philadelphia and the Bills, Howie Roseman, that guy that everybody tries that measures up, Brandon Beane versus Howie Roseman, Sean McDermott being from Philadelphia, cutting his teeth with the Eagles. I mean, there are some things there, but from an organizational standpoint, the Bills aspire to be the Eagles and haven't been able to get there.
And Nick Sirianni being from Jamestown and his
Yeah.
first time coaching the Eagles in Buffalo, that'll be an interesting subplot to that game. And the Bills don't need that game to make the playoffs, or they don't need that win. I think it might affect their seeding if they don't win, and it could affect them winning the division if New England gives them the opportunity to do that. But it won't keep them out of the playoffs. It won't lower their seeding too much or prevent them from having a home playoff game, I don't think, if they lose that game. But I think it'll damage the confidence in the Bills' ability to win 3 playoff games on the road or possibly beat a good NFC team in the Super Bowl if they get beat in that game. So I think it's interesting to how that game goes. I think it's a little bit interesting to see how the Bills play. I guess it really comes down to Dalton Kincaid at this point, but some injured players. Do the Bills think, this Cleveland game is a game where you can rest some of your injured players to have them fresher for next week against the Eagles when it'll be a tougher game, or start resting players or keeping them healthy for the playoffs? Are they in that mode at all yet? I don't think they are because they do need to win this game. But specifically with Dalton Kincaid, it'll be interesting to see how they're resting him in practice. Do they now feel like this Cleveland game is a situation to rest an injured player again?
Yeah, Dalton Kincaid has been back, but not playing much. He's a break glass in case of emergency type thing. It'll be interesting to see what they do with players, the injury prone guys like Joey Bosa, Matt Milano, what they do with them over these last 3 games. Terrell Bernard, he's been banged up, but you want him to get out and get some action. I don't think they want to preserve him totally. I mean, he's going to need to get out there. You're going to want him to play some snaps and take some hits and do that whole thing while also maintaining. There's a lot of guys on the roster that the Bills are going to have to worry about. Joshua Palmer, fill in the blank on most guys. The injury report is pretty long this week, although not many questionable. Cam Lewis, I don't want to say the names off the top of my head. I don't have the list in front of me. It's easy to find.
Jordan Phillips and Cam Lewis are out. Everybody else is
that's
either
right. There's a couple guys who are questionable.
Yeah.
Deion Dawkins is back. He was out 2 days with an illness, and he was back and a full participant in practice on Friday. Jonah, I know there's a couple things we want to mention towards the end, but I want to circle back and to see if there's anything more to discuss from a journalism standpoint. What are your thoughts on what I said earlier about talking out some things on the podcast last week before Matthew Fairburn and I reported them out and have them published at The Athletic? I didn't think about it really at the time because I wasn't sure what was going to see the light of day. But did we say too much last week?
Well, from a journalist perspective, I would say no. I think it's transparent, and it's almost a trend in journalism, especially like, on short form social media, short form videos on social media, to show your work and kind of say what you do know and don't know, and shed some light on the reporting process and some real time reporting and real time talking about what you're hearing and what you're learning that isn't quite ready to type up and send out on the Associated Press wire. There's maybe an employee dynamic about whether you should be doing that, or are you doing that for the right properties. Hopefully that's not an issue. I'd like to be able to continue to do some things like that on this podcast, but I don't know if that's a journalism issue. I think it's more of a Tim Graham contractual status and Tim
Yeah,
Graham's
I think
boss's
it's a
issue.
competitor thing. I think I probably, if my competitors listened to the podcast, they would have gotten a layup, right? They could have just stolen the dribble and gone the full length of the court and laid it in, finger rolled it right in there. But I guess from what I understand, I mean, people did listen to it, but then they didn't report anything on it. So anyways.
And I didn't see it get aggregated very much. And that would be,
No,
part of the dynamic if that was getting picked up and reported on Friday morning from what you said on the podcast. And I think that's a murky journalism situation. If we're just talking out some things that we're hearing and thinking and others are speculating about, and then it gets repurposed as flat, hard reports,
right.
That's different.
For sure. I want to thank those who did credit The Athletic and most importantly Matthew Fairburn, who wrote the story, and me, who contributed to the sourcing of it and some of the meat and potatoes of it. But I guess I bought a couple of the groceries, but Matthew Fairburn cooked the meal. And for those who did credit it and not pretend as though they'd been hearing it all along, I want to thank you. But there were some members of the media who just wanted to say that but what's the big deal? It was expected. But if that was expected, then you probably should have been reporting it yourself instead of waiting until it happened and then shrugging it off like it was no big deal.
And another journalism lesson you can see there, you do see it with The Athletic and some newspapers, but I feel like it doesn't happen as much or as consistently as it used to, is having multiple reporters working the same story, checking in with different sources, being able to corner sources when you have information or you can confirm what somebody else is hearing. You're not as out there on a limb. And I don't know if this is the case, but maybe for you, I think talking to me on this podcast, some of the conversations we had before and after the podcast might have helped you just organize your thoughts or organize what
100%.
you've been hearing.
100%.
So there's a journalism lesson in that reporting as a team, and when sports departments and journalism staffs have the ability to do that, you can get better work done than just having a reporter out there. Access journalism is just one reporter that gets what is fed to him, is not as productive sometimes as multiple reporters working a story from different angles and checking different types of sources and things like that.
Yeah, collaboration is such a strong. It adds a almost undescribable strength to your reporting, because as time goes on and we all work from home, so there's no The Athletic main office. Yes, there's the New York Times building, but we're all scattered around the country. Joe Biscaglia and I, even we're on different sides of Buffalo. I live in the North Towns. He lives in the South Towns. We don't meet in an office every day and kick ideas around. And when we do meet together, we're usually surrounded by our competitors. So Joe and I aren't just able to just spitball we have to get on the phone and stuff like that. That's why I value having beers. You sit and you talk with other reporters and you kick ideas around and concepts. And is this the way you go about it? And what's a way for me to find this? Or how do you work this angle? Or, there's all kinds of things that you used to get back when I was in the Buffalo News's office every day. And even today's Buffalo News down in Larkinville, no longer down at the corner of Scott and Washington, I used to go to the arena after practice and I'd go have lunch at the Buffalo News cafeteria with the copy editors and guys who didn't even cover the Sabres or the Bills, but they are sports people and they are asking me questions and giving me ideas. And you take away that ability to collaborate and bounce things off of a colleague, and you're sitting in your silo and you don't even really know what you're missing. Sometimes you get a little, you're relying on yourself alone to come up with all your angles and execute them. And that's really an ineffective way to do your job. I mean, you need that camaraderie. I think the ability to pull at different threads with people until you come up with the best idea or the best angle. And I even, today's Buffalo News, I mean, I'm just using that as an example because it's what I'm most familiar with. It used to be this hub of information and ideas. And now, from what I understand, people are barely going into the office down at Larkinville. They stop in to pick up their mail or to drop off their expense reports or maybe have a meeting once or twice a year. But the idea of going into an office, a place where you actually sit down and do your work surrounded by other coworkers and getting coffee together and grabbing lunch together and walking out to your cars together into the parking lot. I mean, it's all gone from most places. I'm sure you get that at Channel 4 because you do work in an office concept where Channel 4 has not, you don't work from home. How would you describe that at Channel 4?
Well, I'm out in the field a lot. But sometimes out in the field with other sports reporters. And we do.
But you have a
talk
desk,
and
right?
work
I mean,
together.
a lot of places there, you don't even have a desk anymore. There's no place that you don't have a phone extension or a desk or a mail slot. I mean, everything's from home.
Yeah. Well, and there's news reporters and people who aren't reporting stories but live in the community and hear certain things. And sometimes it's better to do the job in a functioning newsroom than it is as a fully independent journalist. Or, we've been around or maybe even worked with sports reporters who don't like to share any information or leads that they have with their colleagues and want to protect their ego in some ways, but also their ability to get the scoop and claim credit for the scoop. And that might be helpful for some people on their career paths, but it isn't helpful for getting information and reporting information and doing the work for the audience. And something that
Those
I
are the
think is
coworkers
beneficial.
I think I despise the most, Jonah.
Yeah, I don't know who, I'm not naming any names, but and I think maybe you've encountered more of these than I have, but I've seen it happen. And and not just in sports and news and uh things like that. And I hope I'm not telling tales out of school here, but I'm not really going to tell a tale. But I think that your NFL reporting and your NFL sources helped a bit on this Sabres situation, especially with the overlap of who owns the Bills and who owns the Sabres and things like that. And this hasn't helped me often. I don't break a lot of Bills and Saber scoops, but I know with colleges and high schools, I get a lot of information about college teams from high school coaches and people in the high school community and officials and things like that, and vice versa. College coaches that are very tight-lipped or don't want me to know things about their own teams are very free to tell me things they've heard about other high schools or smaller levels of college, and those overlaps, covering different sports, covering different beats, different seasons, is helpful when you're very focused on one beat and one group of sources, and especially in the NFL where they have you quartered off and all the media together. You don't always get the information that you want or need or desire. But when you're out and about and being a true journalist, knocking on different doors and covering things from different angles, you learn and you see and you gain perspectives that are different and sometimes useful, as opposed to just being there at all the official media availabilities and covering everything as straightforward as possible.
I think that, and I'm not saying that this is where it helped me on this particular story, but when you mention like NFL sources helping you on an NHL story or, fill in the blank of like the overlap, the best overlap sourcing I've ever gotten is after covering the sale of a team. And I don't know why, but well, I do know why. I mean, because the people who handle these things handle, people, the people out there who broker sales of teams, do them for all the teams. It's not just NFL teams. It's not just NBA teams. It's not whatever. There are these brokers out there that help the buyer and the bidders. I should say every bidder, and then the seller. And so you're dealing with a lot of different people who are plugged in. And the person who maybe helped this guy try to buy an NFL team is a year earlier or a year later trying to sell an NBA team, or trying to help somebody buy a Major League Baseball team, or helping somebody try to sell this particular NHL team. Or buy. And so there's an overlap. And when you build up trust with a lot of people who are like not really of that league, or, of all the big time businesses that go on. It really started for me when Wayne Huizenga sold the Miami Dolphins while I was covering the Miami Dolphins. And, no, I take that back. It goes back even way further than that. It goes back to, because what really helped me on that story was the Reguses going into bankruptcy while I was covering the Buffalo Sabres, and the NHL getting involved in ownership of the Sabres, and then Tom Golisano and Sherry Bassin, and there were all kinds of different people who tried to buy the Sabres back then, and dealing with that then carried over to helping me break news when the Dolphins were up for sale. Now I'd been in that market for 5 months when that team went up for sale, and I was breaking stories against people who'd been in that market for decades. And it was because I was of that world a little bit, or I could deal with people who had done it before in totally different circumstances. And then Ralph Wilson, when he died, and all the people that I was able to call out of that Rolodex. And I knew this guy's got to be handling, this guy is brokering for somebody. Even if I don't know who it is, he's brokering for somebody, and call up and he's like, no, I'm not brokering for this guy. Actually, I'm out on the Bills. But I know so-and-so is working with so-and-so, and this guy's working with that guy. And, so again, I'm giving away my secrets, but without giving them away. But those are like that. That's where you get so much of your sourcing, is from people who are kind of removed from it, who intimately know things, but are removed from that world, because they're also not beholden to, they don't give a shit if they tell me something, because it's never going to burn them. Like, they hear something about what's going on with a certain market, but they're not involved so they're like, here. And then what happens is something comes up, and a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road, I get a phone call from this person, and they say, hey, what are you hearing about this? And it has nothing, and nothing that I have anything to do with, but I'm here. I've heard about it. And I'm like, well, I've heard this, this, and this. All right, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And that's where the information comes from. That's where you get this shit. And I know that I'm telling a little bit how to make the sausage without showing it. But yeah, that's where you hear all this shit. And that's why I think I'm so able to talk openly about it, is because I know nobody else is getting information from these places where I'm getting it from. And I guess part of me last week was, if you can go find this out, good luck to you. Anyways, I don't know.
It's also helpful for protecting your sources, and when people try to play the game of guessing who your sources are, because I know people ask me this, they're trying to figure out who in the Sabres organization leaked information to you or Matthew Fairburn, and I'm thinking, it probably wasn't that. It was probably something a little bit play action pass kind of situation. Again, I deal with this with amateur sports at the local level, but sometimes I will talk to a coach specifically about something, a job they might be interested in, or something that went on with a player, and they'll tell me what they want reported in the newspaper. And then I'll call another coach who's friends with that coach and had a coach to coach conversation, and they'll say, hey, actually, this is what so-and-so really thinks about that. And maybe I can't report exactly what that is, but it'll help me understand the situation better, and maybe not use all of that official statement, or know that was a little bit of an obfuscation.
Right.
And that coach might not know that they have a friend telling me what exactly happened, or sometimes they do know, but they just, a lot of times they don't want to be quoted saying the wrong thing, but they don't necessarily mind you learning the right thing.
A big part of journalism, a lot of people say it's about gathering facts. No, not necessarily. Sometimes the most valuable journalism is learning what's a lie, or learning what's, I don't want to say a lie because maybe that's nefarious, but learning what is not true and learning to report something that is false. That once you find out, like, just because somebody's saying something on the record doesn't make it true. And so if you know that reporting that just because the person said it, is going to mislead your audience. I mean, sometimes you need to have a statement from somebody. This is their side of things. But if you're going to use it as part of your story, as a plank in your story, and you know it to not be true, well, then that would be unethical as a journalist. So yeah, finding out what not to report is probably as important, if in many cases more important, than finding out what to report. Yeah, it was kind of a throwaway question there at what I thought was at the end of the podcast, Jonah, but I like talking about it.
I think people like listening to
I get
this
a lot of
kind thing,
feedback
yeah.
on that. People like the journalism talk. Anything else you care to mention, Jonah, before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I do just want to mention, there's a lot of toy drives and food drives going on for the holidays. Alex Tuck just had a big one in Lancaster, I believe it was, and Deion Dawkins, other Bills players, I think are doing different things. The Bandits did one. The Sabres, I believe, are doing one at one of their upcoming home games. But one that I was made aware of, and I'm going to try to attend and give a little coverage to, coming up this Tuesday at the Seneca Babcock Community Center in the city of Buffalo. It's being put on by St. Joe's boys basketball assistant coach Josh Lanzette. But what's neat about it is some Division I athletes from Western New York coming back. Shea Sheshke, who's the starting point guard for Indiana from St. Mary's Lancaster, fourth in the country in scoring right now, Big Ten Player of the Week. Gretchen Dolan, another Big Ten point guard for Illinois. They were rivals in high school, at least in the games. I think they're very friendly off the court and rivals now in the Big Ten, and they're going to be working together.
The old Big Ten.
Yeah, the old Big Ten when they only had 10 teams. And Justin Glover, starting point guard for Damon men's basketball team, is up to number 2 in the country right now. He's going to be there. Jaden Slaughter, a former St. Joe's basketball player that's now playing at Sacred Heart University, was a walk-on at UB at one point in his college career. Nick McMillan, wide receiver for University of Buffalo the last few years. He's in the transfer portal now. We'll see where he finishes his college career. But having these different athletes come back, work together for a good cause, and also professional athletes, it's wonderful that they do this. But it's, I feel like it hits a little different when it's these athletes that aren't being paid, although these days they are being paid a little bit, and still doing this for their own hometown communities, and taking the time and the effort and the energy to put something like this together. And not, these athletes aren't doing it with their own names on it to promote their own brands. They're helping out a trainer and a coach that they are fond of and is doing a good thing for the city of Buffalo. And it's for some of these athletes, they're probably giving back to a community center where they grew up playing and know the families and know the kids and know the neighborhood. And that's a real wholesome thing for the holidays. So that's Tuesday night. If anybody is interested in donating to the cause, they could either reach out to me or just, kind of follow up on the promotion of that you might see
What's the
elsewhere.
best way to reach out to you?
I'd say the best way to reach out to me, if you don't have my direct contact, I mean, jonah.bronstein@wivb.com is a direct email. And, if you direct message me on Twitter, and you can get through the weird encryption things that are going on with Twitter direct messages, but I have set those to open. So you should be able to reach me through direct messages on social media, and I'll send you the graphic and the promotional flyer. And then maybe, if you comment on the YouTube page here, I'll try to be responsive to that and get back to some people if I see that. Or, meet us at Elmo's one of these nights and we could talk face to face.
Yeah. How about tonight? Friday night. We'll be at Elmo's, right? Can we advertise that?
Sure. Yeah.
Drop
TGAF
by
hang.
Elmo's Friday night. We'll buy you a beer. Say, I heard you on the podcast and I'll buy you a beer. That's like a little Easter egg. If you've made it to the end here, beer's on me. If you just say you heard it first on Tim Graham and Friends or some shit.
Yeah, I always get a kick of kick out of running into our listeners. Sometimes, I've been walking the halls at the arena, the concourses at the arena, and somebody will stop me and just say, "Hey, I recognize you from the podcast." They don't even really know my writing and my work or my social media quite so much, but they recognize my face from watching this YouTube channel, or they, know who I am through this podcast, and they want to say hello. And then even friends of mine that I know and I think are aware of things I put on social media and things I publish on the internet, but I'm not so aware of the fact that they listen to this podcast and they tell me, "Oh, I've listened to every episode for 2, 3 years. I love it." That's always kind of neat to hear.
That is great. When I get stopped, it's never for anything in particular. So I don't know if it's for the podcast or not.
Well, you're a big star on BKL. I think that's where you get your most recognition.
BKL is probably where I get the most, actually. I mean, even way more than my work. And I'm on that thing for what? 10 minutes total over the span of an hour. I'm on it for 10 minutes most weeks, not even every week. And that's where people say, "Hey, I see you on TV." I'm like, "Yeah, I do some other things too." But yeah, you're right. It's the power of television. The power of 4.
Right.
Jonah, thanks for this.
With you.
Thanks to everybody out there for watching. Let's end this podcast, Jonah, by showing our 4s, just like we would at the end of the newscast. Thanks to everybody out there for watching and for listening. Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and business consultants.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.